The water was so cold it burned, but Annabel Vance had no choice except to scrub the threadbare cotton against the smooth rocks, watching brown stains from weeks of wear slowly dissolve into the creek that ran behind Calico, California in the bitter February of 1884. Her fingers had gone numb 10 minutes ago, her bare feet planted on stones that felt like shards of ice, and she wore nothing but her thin chemise and drawers because the dress in her hands was the only complete garment she owned in this world. The sun was setting behind the distant mountains, casting long shadows across the desert landscape, and she knew she would have to put the dress back on wet or freeze to death in the coming night. She had arrived in Calico 3 weeks ago with nothing but hope and the clothes on her back, fleeing a situation in Missouri that had left her orphaned and desperate. The mining town had seemed like a place where a young woman of 22 might disappear into the chaos of silver fever and start fresh. But she had quickly learned that survival here required either money or connections, and she possessed neither. The boarding house where she had spent her last coins had turned her out 4 days ago, and since then she had been sleeping in an abandoned prospector's shack on the outskirts of town, eating whatever scraps she could beg or forage, and trying to maintain some shred of dignity by keeping herself and her single dress as clean as possible. The fabric was nearly transparent in places now, worn through by countless washings, and the hard life she had led even before coming west. Her mother had made this dress 5 years ago, when there was still a family farm and a future that looked nothing like this frozen creek and these desperate circumstances. Annabel blinked back tears that had nothing to do with the cold wind cutting through the canyon, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand. She would survive this. She had survived everything else. That was when she heard the horse. Annabel's head snapped up, her heart hammering with sudden fear. A lone rider was approaching along the creek path, silhouetted against the dying light. She clutched her wet dress to her chest, painfully aware of how exposed she was in her undergarments, how vulnerable. In a town like Calico, where men outnumbered women 10 to 1 and lawlessness was as common as dust, a woman alone was prey. The rider drew closer, and she could make out more details. He sat tall in the saddle, wearing a brown duster that hung open to reveal a dark vest and shirt. A hat shadowed his face, but she could see the strong line of his jaw, the broad shoulders that spoke of hard work and harder living. He was leading a pack horse laden with supplies, and as he approached, he slowed his mount to a walk. "Evening, miss," he called out, his voice carrying easily across the distance between them. There was no threat in his tone, only a careful courtesy that made her relax slightly, though she remained wary. "Evening," Annabel replied, her voice shakier than she wanted. The cold was making her teeth chatter, and she could not stop shivering. The rider came to a complete stop about 20 feet away, and she realized he was deliberately keeping his distance, giving her space. He pushed his hat back, and she saw his face clearly for the first time. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that were kind even in the fading light. There was a weathered quality to his features, the look of a man who spent his life outdoors, but there was also something gentle in his expression that made her instinctively trust him more than she should have. "Name is Gabriel Lawrence," he said. "I have a ranch about 5 miles south of here. Was coming back from picking up supplies in town." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I do not mean to intrude on your privacy, miss, but it is getting dark and cold, and I could not help but notice you seem to be in some difficulty." Annabel's face burned with shame despite the frigid temperature. "I am managing just fine, thank you." Gabriel was quiet for a moment, and then he said gently, I do not mean any disrespect, but you are standing in freezing water in your underclothes washing what looks like your only dress, and the sun is about to go down. That does not look like managing fine to me." The kindness in his voice broke something inside her. Annabel felt tears spill over, hot against her frozen cheeks. "What business is it of yours?" she asked, but there was no heat in the question, only exhaustion. "None at all," Gabriel admitted. He swung down from his horse with an easy grace, but he still did not approach her. Instead, he went to his pack horse and began untying one of the bundles secured there. "But I was raised by a good mother who taught me that, when you see someone in need, you help if you can. So if you will allow me, I would like to offer you some assistance." Annabel watched him warily as he opened the bundle and pulled out folded fabric. Even from a distance, she could see these were good quality garments, nothing like her worn-out dress. Gabriel laid 3 dresses carefully over a large boulder, then retrieved something else from his pack, a heavy coat lined with what looked like sheep's wool. "My mother passed 2 years ago," he said quietly, still not looking directly at her, giving her privacy. "She was about your size, I think. These have been packed away in a trunk at the ranch. She would have wanted someone to get use out of them rather than have them collect dust. And this coat was my sister's before she married and moved to Sacramento. It has just been taking up space." "I cannot accept charity," Annabel said, even as her body screamed at her to take the warm, dry clothes. Gabriel finally looked at her directly, and his eyes were serious. "It is not charity. It is human decency. You are freezing to death and I have resources I do not need. If the situation were reversed, I would hope someone would do the same for me." He paused. "Please, let me help." The simple earnestness in his voice made her decision. Annabel nodded slowly. "Thank you. I do not know what to say." "You do not need to say anything." Gabriel turned his back to her, giving her privacy. "I will wait over here. Take your time." With numb, clumsy fingers, Annabel climbed out of the creek and hurried to the boulder. The dresses were beautiful, made of sturdy wool and cotton in deep greens and blues and one in a dark burgundy. They were simple but well made, the kind of practical garments a rancher's wife or daughter would wear. She chose the green one and struggled into it, her frozen hands making the buttons almost impossible to fasten. The fabric was soft and warm against her skin, and it fit reasonably well, only a little loose in the waist. Then she wrapped herself in the coat, and the relief was so overwhelming she nearly sobbed. The wool lining held warmth like a blessing, and for the first time in days she stopped shivering. "I am decent now," she said softly. Gabriel turned back around, and something in his expression softened when he saw her properly clothed and warming up. "That color suits you," he said, then seemed embarrassed by the observation. "What I mean is, I am glad they fit." "They are perfect," Annabel said. She looked down at her old dress still lying on the rocks where she had dropped it. "I do not even need that anymore, I suppose." "Keep it anyway," Gabriel suggested. "Always good to have a spare. Let me help you wring it out at least, and you can take it with you." He walked over and picked up the sodden fabric, his strong hands making quick work of twisting out the excess water. When he handed it back to her, his fingers accidentally brushed hers, and she felt a spark of something that had nothing to do with the cold. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Annabel found herself noticing details she had missed before: the small scar above his left eyebrow, the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, the way his mouth curved slightly as if he smiled often. There was something solid and trustworthy about him, something that made her want to know more. Gabriel cleared his throat and stepped back. "Where are you staying, Miss Vance? Can I escort you back to town? It will be full dark soon and the path is not safe." Annabel hesitated, then decided she had nothing left to lose by being honest. I do not have anywhere in town. I have been staying in an abandoned shack on the eastern edge. I ran out of money for the boarding house. Gabriel's expression grew troubled. That shack is not fit for habitation. The roof is half collapsed and there are no walls on the north side. It is all I have, Annabel said quietly. For a long moment, Gabriel seemed to be wrestling with something internal. Then he said carefully, I have a proposition, and I want you to know there are no improper intentions behind it. My ranch needs help. I have been running it alone since my mother died, and I am falling behind on everything. The house needs cleaning, the chickens need tending, the garden has gone to seed, and I can barely keep up with the cattle and horses and all the other work. If you are willing, I could offer you employment as my housekeeper. Room and board plus $20 a month. You would have your own bedroom with a lock on the door, and I give you my word as a gentleman that I would never approach you inappropriately. Annabel stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception or hidden motive. All she saw was honest concern and a genuine offer. You do not know anything about me. I could be a thief or worse. Are you? Gabriel asked with a slight smile. No, Annabel said firmly. I am just someone who made the mistake of coming west without enough money or plans. Then we are in agreement, Gabriel said. I need help. You need employment and shelter. It is a fair exchange. He paused. If you want references to my character, you can ask anyone in Calico. I have been ranching in this area for 6 years, and I have a reputation for honesty and fair dealing. Or if you prefer, I can take you back to town and you can think about it overnight. Annabel thought about the freezing shack, about going to bed hungry again, about washing her only dress in the creek. She thought about this man who had stopped to help a stranger, who had given her clothes that belonged to his dead mother without asking for anything in return, who was now offering her honest work with respect and dignity. I will accept your offer, she said. But I want to be clear that it is purely a business arrangement. Absolutely, Gabriel agreed. You have my word. He held out his hand to shake on it, and after a moment, Annabel took it. His grip was warm and firm, and she felt that spark again, stronger this time. Gabriel helped her gather her few belongings from the shack, which amounted to a small bundle of personal items she had carried from Missouri. Then he helped her mount the pack horse, settling her carefully on top of the secured supplies before swinging onto his own mount. They rode south as the stars began to appear overhead, and Annabel watched the broad line of Gabriel's shoulders ahead of her, wondering what she had just agreed to and whether this was the worst or best decision of her life. The ranch appeared as a cluster of dark shapes against the starlit sky, and as they drew closer, Annabel could make out more details. There was a good-sized house built of wood and stone, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals that held cattle and horses. It was clearly a working ranch, prosperous but not wealthy, maintained by hard work and dedication. Gabriel had not been exaggerating about needing help. Even in the darkness, she could see places where repairs were needed, fences that sagged, a garden plot that was overgrown with weeds. Gabriel helped her down from the horse and led her to the house. He lit a lantern that hung by the door, and the warm glow illuminated a front porch that was swept clean but otherwise bare. Inside, the house was spacious and well built, with a large main room that served as kitchen and living area and 3 doors that led to what she assumed were bedrooms. There was a stone fireplace that took up most of one wall, and furniture that was simple but sturdy. Everything was covered in a layer of dust, and there were clear signs of bachelor living, dishes stacked in the dry sink, boots left where they had been kicked off, a shirt draped over a chair. It is not much to look at right now, Gabriel said, sounding apologetic, but it has good bones. My father built this house 20 years ago when he first claimed this land. He died in a riding accident when I was 19, and my mother and I kept the ranch going until she passed. He lit another lantern and gestured to the doors. That one is my room. This one here is the spare room that would be yours, and that one is a storage room and office. He opened the door to what would be her room, and Annabel stepped inside. It was a decent size, with a real bed covered in quilts, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out toward the east. There was even a small mirror on the wall and a rag rug on the floor. It was more than she had dared hope for. "There is a lock here," Gabriel said, demonstrating the mechanism on the inside of the door. "And I will never enter without your permission. Your privacy is your own." "Thank you," Annabel said softly. "This is more than generous." Gabriel nodded. "I will take care of the horses and then fix us something to eat. You must be hungry. Make yourself comfortable and come out whenever you are ready." He left, closing the door behind him, and Annabel sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling overwhelmed. This morning she had been washing her only dress in a freezing creek, convinced she might not survive another week. Now she had warm clothes, a safe place to sleep, and honest employment. She pressed her hands to her face and allowed herself to cry, this time with relief rather than despair. After a few minutes, she composed herself and went out to the main room. Gabriel had started a fire in the fireplace and was working at the stove, frying salt pork and heating beans. The smell made her stomach clench with hunger. He glanced up when she entered and gestured to the table. "Sit down. It will be ready soon." Annabel sat, watching him move around the kitchen with practiced ease. "How long have you been managing alone?" she asked. 2 years, like I said. My sister Martha stayed for 6 months after Mother died, but then she met her husband and moved away. I have been on my own since then." He brought 2 plates to the table, piled high with food, and sat down across from her. "I apologize for the state of the house. I keep meaning to do a proper cleaning, but by the end of the day, I am too tired to do more than collapse into bed." "I will start tomorrow," Annabel promised. She took a bite of the beans and nearly moaned with pleasure. It was simple food, but it was hot and plentiful, and she was so hungry she could have eaten twice as much. Gabriel seemed to notice her appetite because he wordlessly got up and brought the pan over, scraping half of what remained onto her plate. "Eat as much as you want. There is plenty." They ate in companionable silence for a while, and then Gabriel said, "Tell me about yourself if you are comfortable doing so. How did you end up in Calico?" Annabel set down her fork, choosing her words carefully. "My parents had a farm in Missouri. They both died of influenza last autumn, and the bank took the property for unpaid debts. I had no other family, no prospects. I had heard that California was a place where people could start over, so I used what little money I had to buy a train ticket west. I thought I could find work in Calico, maybe as a seamstress or a cook, but I arrived with almost nothing, and the town is not kind to women without means or connections." "I am sorry," Gabriel said, and she could hear the genuine sympathy in his voice. "That must have been terrifying." "It was," Annabel admitted. "I have never been so scared in my life. I kept thinking I was going to die out here and no one would even know my name." Gabriel reached across the table and briefly touched her hand. "You are safe now. I meant what I said about this being a fair business arrangement, but I also want you to know that you are not alone anymore. Whatever help you need, I will provide if I can." The warmth in his eyes made something flutter in Annabel's chest. She pulled her hand back gently, not wanting to encourage anything improper, but she could not deny the pull she felt toward this kind stranger, who had appeared exactly when she needed him most. That night, lying in her new bed under warm quilts, Annabel stared at the ceiling and tried to process everything that had happened. She had a job now, a safe place to stay, and an employer who seemed genuinely decent. But she was also aware of the attraction she felt toward Gabriel, the way her heart had sped up when their hands touched, the way she had noticed the strength in his arms and the gentleness in his smile. She reminded herself sternly that she could not afford to develop feelings for him. This was employment, nothing more. She had to protect herself, had to maintain boundaries. But as she drifted off to sleep, warm and fed and safe for the first time in weeks, she could not help but think about the way Gabriel had looked at her when she had put on the green dress, or the careful respect in his voice when he had promised to never violate her trust. The next morning, Annabel woke to the sound of roosters crowing and sunlight streaming through her window. For a disorienting moment, she could not remember where she was, and then everything came flooding back. She dressed quickly in one of the other dresses Gabriel had given her, the blue one, and braided her hair. When she emerged from her room, she found Gabriel already up and making coffee. "Morning," he said with a smile that made her stomach flip. "I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in months," Annabel admitted. "What time is it?" "About 6. I am usually up before dawn to tend the animals, but I let you sleep in since it was your first night." He poured her a cup of coffee and handed it to her. "I thought today you could get familiar with the house and decide where you want to start with the cleaning. I will be out working with the cattle, but I will come back around noon for lunch. Does that sound acceptable?" "That sounds perfect," Annabel said. She sipped the coffee, strong and hot, and felt energy flowing back into her body. "Is there anything particular you need done first?" Gabriel looked around the dusty, cluttered main room and laughed. "Everything needs doing. Just start wherever makes sense to you." "Oh, and the chickens need feeding and their eggs collected. The feed is in the barn, and you will find baskets by the back door." After Gabriel left, Annabel stood in the middle of the main room and assessed the work ahead of her. It was daunting, but she felt a sense of purpose she had not experienced in a long time. This was honest work, and she was good at it. She had kept her family's farmhouse spotless for years before everything fell apart. She started with the dishes, hauling water from the well outside and heating it on the stove. Then she worked her way through the kitchen area, scrubbing surfaces and organizing supplies. She found food stores in a pantry that needed sorting, preserves that had been put up by Gabriel's mother years ago, sacks of flour and beans and rice. Everything was good quality but poorly organized. She made mental notes about what needed to be used soon and what could wait. By mid-morning, she took a break to feed the chickens and collect eggs. The hen house was behind the barn, a sturdy structure with nesting boxes and a fenced run. The chickens clucked and pecked at her feet as she scattered feed, and she found herself smiling at their antics. There were 14 eggs in the nesting boxes, still warm. She gathered them carefully in a basket and took them back to the house. When Gabriel returned at noon, he stopped in the doorway and stared. Annabel had cleaned the entire main room, washing windows and floors, dusting furniture, organizing clutter. The space looked transformed, bright and welcoming instead of dark and neglected. "I cannot believe this is the same room," Gabriel said, genuine amazement in his voice. "You did all this in one morning." Annabel felt herself flush with pleasure at his praise. "There is still a lot more to do, but it is a start." "It is an incredible start," Gabriel said. He removed his hat and hung it on a peg by the door, a gesture that felt somehow intimate in the clean, ordered space. "You are worth 10 times what I am paying you." "I am just doing my job," Annabel said, but she could not help smiling. They fell into a routine over the next few weeks. Gabriel worked the ranch, tending his cattle and horses, mending fences, and managing the 100 tasks that kept a ranch running. Annabel transformed the house and grounds, cleaning and organizing, planting a new garden, tending the chickens, and cooking meals that were far better than anything Gabriel had eaten in 2 years. They took their meals together, talking about their days, their past lives, their hopes and dreams. Annabel learned that Gabriel had always wanted to expand the ranch, to build a proper herd and maybe start breeding horses. He had a good eye for livestock and a patient way with animals that made them trust him. He talked about his parents with deep affection, about his sister and her children whom he rarely got to see. He admitted that he sometimes felt lonely out here, especially in the evenings when the work was done and there was nothing but silence. Gabriel learned that Annabel loved to read, but had not owned a book since selling everything to buy her train ticket. He learned that she had a talent for gardening, that she could make even the toughest cut of meat tender and delicious, that she sang to herself when she thought no one was listening. He learned that she had a quick wit and a stubborn streak, that she worked harder than any hired hand he had ever employed, and that she was determined to prove she could earn her keep. What neither of them would admit, even to themselves, was that they were falling in love. It happened slowly, in small moments. The way Gabriel started bringing her wildflowers he found on the range, claiming they were just brightening up the table. The way Annabel started taking extra care with her appearance, wearing her hair in styles that flattered her face. The way they lingered over meals, talking long after the dishes were cleared. The way they found excuses to be near each other, their hands brushing when they passed items, their eyes meeting across rooms. One evening in early April, about 6 weeks after Annabel had arrived, they were sitting on the front porch watching the sunset. It had become their habit to spend this time together, resting after the day's work. The desert was painted in shades of orange and pink and purple, and the air had finally lost the bitter chill of winter. "I have been thinking," Gabriel said carefully, "that maybe we should go into Calico this weekend. You have not been to town since you arrived, and there are supplies we need. Plus, I thought you might like to look at the general store. They have books sometimes and fabric if you wanted to make anything." Annabel's heart swelled at his thoughtfulness. "I would like that very much, but I do not have money for books or fabric." "Consider it an advance on your salary," Gabriel said. "You have earned it 10 times over. You have already given me so much," Annabel protested. "The dresses, the coat, room, and board. I feel like I am taking advantage." Gabriel turned to look at her, his expression serious. "Annabel, you have brought this ranch back to life. You have made this house a home again. Every day I come in from work, and there is hot food waiting and a clean place to rest, and someone to talk to who actually cares about my thoughts. Do you have any idea what that means to someone who has been alone for 2 years? There was something in his eyes that made Annabel's breath catch. "Gabriel, I know we agreed this was a business arrangement," Gabriel interrupted, his voice rough, "and I have tried to respect that. But I cannot keep pretending that I do not feel more than employer gratitude when I look at you." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. "I think about you constantly. I find myself looking forward to meals just because it means I get to sit across from you. I lay awake at night knowing you are just on the other side of that wall, and I want nothing more than to go to you and tell you how I feel." Annabel's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I am falling in love with you," Gabriel said simply. "I know I have no right, and I know you probably do not feel the same way, but I cannot keep it inside anymore. You deserve to know the truth." For a moment, Annabel could not speak. Then slowly, she reached out and took his hand. "I feel the same way," she whispered. I've been trying so hard not to, trying to tell myself it was just gratitude or loneliness, but it is not. I am falling in love with you too." Gabriel's entire face lit up with joy. He squeezed her hand gently. "Do you mean it?" "I mean it," Annabel said, and then she was laughing and crying at the same time. "I've been so afraid to let myself feel this way, but I cannot help it. You are the kindest, most decent man I have ever met, and when you look at me, I feel like I matter. Like I am worth something." "You are worth everything," Gabriel said fiercely. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "You are smart and strong and beautiful, and I thank God every day that I happened to ride past that creek when I did." They sat together on the porch as the sun disappeared below the horizon, holding hands and talking about their feelings, about what this meant for their future. Gabriel made it clear that he wanted to court her properly, to do things the right way. Annabel agreed, even though part of her wanted to throw caution to the wind and kiss him right then and there. The trip to Calico that Saturday was like a dream. Gabriel drove the wagon, and Annabel sat beside him, acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched as the wagon bounced over the rutted road. In town, Gabriel introduced her to everyone they met as his housekeeper, but there was a pride in his voice that suggested she was much more than that. They shopped together, and Gabriel insisted on buying her 3 books, a length of beautiful cotton fabric in a pale yellow, and a new pair of gloves. At the general store, they ran into a woman named Mrs. Henderson who had known Gabriel's mother. She looked Annabel up and down with sharp eyes. "So you are the mysterious woman living out at the Lawrence ranch," she said. "Mrs. Vance is my housekeeper," Gabriel said firmly. "She has been a tremendous help." "I am sure she has," Mrs. Henderson said with a knowing look. "Your mother would be pleased to see the house properly cared for again, Gabriel, and she always did want to see you settled." After Mrs. Henderson walked away, Gabriel groaned. "That woman is the biggest gossip in 3 counties. By tomorrow, everyone will be speculating about us." "Does that bother you?" Annabel asked quietly. "Not even a little," Gabriel said, looking at her with such warmth that she felt her cheeks heat. "Let them talk. They will be saying far more interesting things soon enough." Over the next few months, Gabriel courted Annabel with an old-fashioned devotion that made her fall even more deeply in love with him. He brought her flowers every day, different wildflowers from different parts of the range. He carved her a beautiful wooden box to keep her treasures in. On Sundays, their day of rest, he would take her on rides around the property, showing her the hidden beautiful places he had discovered over years of ranching. They would pack a lunch and spend hours talking, sometimes sitting so close their shoulders touched, sometimes holding hands as they walked. Gabriel was always respectful, never pushing her for more than she was ready to give. But the tension between them grew, the awareness of their mutual desire. The way his eyes lingered on her when she moved around the kitchen. The way her breath caught when he rolled up his sleeves, and she saw the strong muscles of his forearms. The accidental touches that felt electric. One evening in late June, after a particularly hot day, they were sitting on the porch again. Annabel had made lemonade from precious lemons Gabriel had bought in town, and they were savoring the tart sweetness. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and cicadas sang in the desert brush. "Annabel," Gabriel said softly, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly without feeling any pressure." She looked at him, her heart suddenly pounding. "All right." Gabriel took both her hands in his. "These past few months have been the happiest of my life. You have brought joy and purpose and love into my world, and I cannot imagine going back to the way things were before. I know we have not known each other very long by most standards, but out here, things move differently. People cannot afford to waste time when they find something real. He took a deep breath. What I am trying to say is, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, not just my housekeeper? Will you build a life with me here on this ranch? Annabel felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling so broadly her cheeks hurt. Yes, she said. Yes, absolutely yes. Gabriel let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into his arms, hugging her tightly. Then he pulled back slightly, his eyes searching her face. "May I kiss you, please?" Annabel whispered. His lips met hers gently at first, tentative and sweet. Then the kiss deepened, becoming more passionate as months of restrained desire finally found release. Annabel's hands slid up to tangle in his hair, and Gabriel's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I love you," Gabriel said, resting his forehead against hers. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Annabel replied, "more than I ever thought possible." They decided to get married quickly, neither seeing any reason to wait. Gabriel rode into Calico the next day and arranged for the circuit preacher to come out to the ranch in 2 weeks. Annabel sewed herself a wedding dress from the yellow fabric Gabriel had bought her, working late into the evenings by lamplight. Gabriel cleaned up the barn and arranged for neighbors to come for a small celebration after the ceremony. The day of the wedding dawned clear and bright, the July sun already hot by mid-morning. Annabel dressed in her yellow gown, and Martha, Gabriel's sister, arrived with her husband and children, having made the journey from Sacramento. Martha helped Annabel with her hair, pinning it up with wildflowers that Gabriel had picked that morning. "My brother has not stopped smiling since he sent word about the wedding," Martha said, adjusting one of the flowers. "He was so lonely after Mother died. I worried about him constantly. But then he met you and everything changed. Thank you for making him happy." "He makes me happy too," Annabel said softly. "He saved my life in every way that matters." The ceremony took place in front of the house, with about 20 neighbors and friends in attendance. Gabriel wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed, and when he saw Annabel walking toward him, his eyes filled with tears. They spoke their vows in strong, clear voices, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Gabriel kissed her with such tenderness that several of the women in attendance sighed. The celebration that followed was joyful and boisterous. There was music and dancing and more food than they could possibly eat. Neighbors who had known Gabriel for years welcomed Annabel into the community with genuine warmth. Mrs. Henderson even pulled her aside to apologize for her earlier sharp assessment, and to say that Gabriel had clearly chosen well. As the sun set and the guests began to leave, Gabriel and Annabel stood together, his arm around her waist, waving goodbye. When the last wagon had disappeared down the road, Gabriel turned to his new wife with a look that made her heart race. "Mrs. Lawrence," he said softly. "I like the sound of that." "So do I," Annabel replied. "So do I." That night they came together as husband and wife with a passion and tenderness that felt like the natural culmination of everything that had been building between them. Afterward, lying in Gabriel's arms in the bed that had been his alone for so long, Annabel felt a contentment she had never known was possible. "What are you thinking?" Gabriel asked, running his fingers through her loose hair. "I am thinking about that day at the creek," Annabel said. "I was convinced I was going to die, that I had made terrible choices and was paying the price. And then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I had been too proud to say out loud." Gabriel pulled her closer. "I almost did not ride that way. I usually take the northern trail back from town. But something made me go south that day. Call it fate or providence or just luck. I am grateful for whatever it was." "Me too," Annabel whispered. "Me too." Their first year of marriage was filled with hard work and deep happiness. Annabel continued to manage the household and help with ranch tasks, proving herself capable with livestock and horses. Gabriel expanded his herd, buying more cattle and starting to build the breeding program he had always dreamed of. Together, they made improvements to the property, adding a larger chicken coop, expanding the garden, and repairing all the fences and outbuildings that had been neglected during Gabriel's years alone. In the evenings, they would read together, with Annabel sitting in Gabriel's lap by the fire, or they would talk about their plans for the future. They spoke of children, both of them wanting a family. Annabel worried sometimes that she would not be able to conceive, but Gabriel always reassured her that they had time, that whatever happened, they would face it together. In March of 1885, just over a year after that fateful day at the creek, Annabel realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another few weeks to be sure, then told Gabriel over breakfast one morning. "I think I am with child," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Gabriel dropped his fork, his face transforming with joy. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be," Annabel said. "I have all the signs my mother told me about." Gabriel came around the table and pulled her into his arms, kissing her face, her hair, her hands. "This is the best news, the absolute best news. We are going to be parents." The pregnancy was relatively easy, and Annabel continued working as long as she was able, only slowing down in the final months. Gabriel became even more protective and attentive, constantly making sure she was not overexerting herself. Martha came to stay for the last month, wanting to be there when the baby arrived. Annabel went into labor on a November evening, and after a long night and most of the next day, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Gabriel was there for the whole ordeal, holding her hand and refusing to leave her side despite Martha's protests that it was not proper. When the midwife placed their son in Annabel's arms, both parents wept with joy. The baby had Gabriel's dark hair and Annabel's blue eyes, and he was perfect in every way. "What should we name him?" Gabriel asked, gently touching his son's tiny hand. "What was your father's name?" Annabel asked. "Thomas," Gabriel said. "Thomas Andrew Lawrence." "Then let us call him Andrew," Annabel suggested. "Andrew Gabriel Lawrence." Gabriel kissed her forehead gently. "Perfect. He is absolutely perfect, just like his mother." The years that followed were filled with the joys and challenges of raising a family and running a ranch. Andrew grew into a strong, curious boy who loved following his father around and helping with ranch work. 2 years after Andrew's birth, Annabel had a daughter they named Grace, who had her mother's blonde hair and her father's brown eyes. 3 years after that came another son, Samuel, who was the image of Gabriel. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Gabriel's horse breeding program became successful, and people came from as far as Los Angeles to buy his stock. Annabel's garden produced abundantly, and she began selling preserves and produce in Calico. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. Every year on the anniversary of the day they met, Gabriel would take Annabel back to the creek where he had first found her. They would sit on the rocks and remember that February afternoon when a freezing woman washing her only dress had met a kind cowboy who stopped to help. They would talk about how far they had come, how blessed they were, how grateful they were for the chance encounter that had changed both their lives. "You ever think about what would have happened if you had taken the Northern Trail that day?" Annabel asked one year as they sat by the creek, their 3 children playing nearby. "I try not to," Gabriel admitted. "It is too painful to imagine. You are my whole world, Annabel, you and our children. I cannot picture my life without you in it." "I feel the same way," Annabel said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "That was the worst day of my life and the best day of my life all at once. The day I hit bottom and the day I was saved." "We saved each other," Gabriel corrected gently. "I was drowning in loneliness and grief, and you brought me back to life just as much as I helped you." As the years passed, their love only deepened. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, illnesses and injuries, the normal challenges of ranch life. But through everything, they remained a team, facing each obstacle together. Their children grew up watching a marriage built on mutual respect, genuine affection, and unwavering support, and they learned what love should look like. Andrew eventually took over much of the ranch work, allowing Gabriel to slow down as he aged. Grace married a teacher from Calico and moved into town but visited frequently with her own children. Samuel showed a talent for horse training that exceeded even his father's abilities, and he expanded that part of the business. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Gabriel and Annabel sat on their porch watching the sunset, just as they had done thousands of times before. Their hair was graying now, and their hands bore the marks of decades of hard work, but when they looked at each other, they saw the same people who had fallen in love by a freezing creek so many years ago. 25 years, Annabel marveled. It has gone so fast. "The best 25 years of my life," Gabriel said. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it, just as he had that first night when they had confessed their feelings. "I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Even the hard parts?" Annabel asked with a smile. "Especially the hard parts," Gabriel confirmed, "because we went through them together and they made us stronger. There is not a single moment I would change." As the sun painted the desert sky in brilliant colors, Annabel thought about the young woman she had been, desperate and freezing and convinced she had reached the end. She thought about the unexpected kindness of a stranger who had given her not just warm clothes and shelter, but hope and love and a future beyond her wildest dreams. "Thank you," she said softly. Gabriel looked at her quizzically. "For what?" "For stopping that day," Annabel said. "For seeing someone in need and choosing to help instead of riding past. For giving me a chance when you did not have to. For loving me." "Thank you for accepting my help," Gabriel replied. "For trusting me when you had every reason to be wary. For bringing joy and love into this house. For choosing to build a life with me." He paused, his voice growing husky with emotion. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Annabel Lawrence." They sat together as the stars began to appear, holding hands and watching the desert night unfold around them. In the house behind them, they could hear the sounds of family. Andrew discussing ranch business with Samuel, Grace's laughter as she played with her children, the comforting noises of a home filled with love. This was the life they had built together, starting from that desperate moment at a freezing creek, when fate had intervened in the form of a kind cowboy with 3 dresses and a warm coat. This was the legacy of a simple act of compassion that had blossomed into a love story spanning decades. And as they sat together under the vast California sky, Gabriel and Annabel knew with absolute certainty that they would face whatever years remained to them the same way they had faced everything else. Together, with love, with gratitude, and with the unshakable knowledge that they had found in each other exactly what they needed. The ranch would continue long after they were gone, passed down to children and grandchildren who would hear the story of how their grandparents met. It would become family legend, the tale of a woman washing her only dress in a freezing creek and the cowboy who stopped to help, who gave her not just clothing but a future, not just shelter but a home, not just kindness but a love that would last a lifetime. And every time the story was told, It would remind those who heard it that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places, that compassion can change lives, and that true love can grow from the smallest seed of kindness into something beautiful and enduring that outlasts everything else in this world.